Welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we rethink money, ditch the system, and rediscover what it means to truly thrive well. I'm Tricia Miller, mom of 7, financial coach, and founder of Thrivewell. Around here, we believe wealth is more than numbers. It's about freedom, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts. If you're ready to challenge the norm and take back control of your financial life, you're in the right place. Hello, and welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast. Last week, I discussed at length about the biblical virtues of whole life insurance and the infinite banking concept. And I also mentioned that I had received a communication from an individual who called whole life insurance a scam. And of course, he also sent me a Dave Ramsey video, so we know where this came from. But if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, you might want to listen to that one first. It is episode number 10, and it's actually whole life virtue or scam. Now, in brief, I'm just going to say that we walk through some of the virtues and the origins of whole life insurance. And I cited the fact that whole life insurance originated as a means to care for widows and orphans, as well as a way to leave an inheritance as per Proverbs 13:22, among other things that make it, in my mind, a superior product with its living benefits. However, today, I want to take a look at the alternative that is offered and promoted by some of these same folks who say that whole life insurance is a scam. And they are primarily promoting that we should buy term and invest the difference. And I hardly think you can avoid hearing that mantra today. So let me just preface this with some of the ideas that came in this communication to me. And of course, the first thing that sparked this whole conversation was that he mentioned that it has nothing to do with religious beliefs, which is why I did most of last week's episode. Continuing on, though, he said, instead, it has everything to do with concrete numbers, and the numbers don't jive at all. He goes on to say, it's a crummy investment, and the only people who benefit are the insurance company and the insurance salespeople like me. Term life insurance, on the other hand, is simple, he says. It is only $53 a month for 30 years for $1 million in coverage. Meanwhile, he invests in the stock market and has investment accounts with projections of $2.5 million in net worth by age 65. Meanwhile, whole life costs 20 times more and never stops costing the policyholder. It's a crummy life insurance policy and a crummy investment account too. Now, let me just say from the get-go that I have absolutely no issue with this gentleman. He gave me his honest thoughts and I chose not to debate him. Relationships matter more to me than that. And at first, I had honestly no intention of even bringing this up on this podcast. But, I decided it was important to do this because this particular thinking, in fact, I would say that his communication was absolutely perfect to this particular thinking. It's so incredibly common. And so therefore, I think it's really important that I do answer whether or not this individual is what he's saying is true. And because also I have clients out there and prospective clients who are going to be faced with and hear these same sorts of criticisms if they consider becoming their own banker. So I think it's very valid for me to actually answer these assertions and give an answer to what has been charged here. So here we go. So when we buy term and invest the difference, though, let's be clear, it comes from an assumption that it's better to spend less money on term insurance than whole life insurance because whole life insurance is obviously considered too expensive. It's a waste of money. That's part of why they say it's a scam. And of course, the idea is that by saving on the insurance piece, then you will have more money left over to invest. So that is clearly what we ought to do. But is that true? Or does this practice actually put families at an unnecessary risk? Well, without going into a lot of detail about term insurance, I'm going to simply state that I did do a podcast recently. In fact, it was episode 8 on whole life versus term. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But I will just say here that there is a place for term insurance. I am not opposed to term insurance, But it is crucially important that people understand that term is temporary insurance. It solves a temporary need. It was never intended to be the only insurance you ever carry in your lifetime. And the fact of the matter is that it will expire 99% of the time before you do, which means that every premium you ever pay into a term policy, you will most likely never see again. So it is very highly unlikely that it will ever pay out a death benefit to your heirs, which means that you will pass away, not leaving anything behind for the remaining family members, at least in terms of insurance of a death benefit. So it's cheap, but it may not deliver the value that you might wish you had down the road. Now, the other idea behind this is that you are going to invest the rest of those dollars and have no need of insurance because you're going to self-insure with the massive amounts of money that you are presumably going to accumulate over a lifetime, such that by the time you get to retirement, you will not need insurance anymore. Well, this, unfortunately, is exactly what my dearly loved brother believed and practiced. He bought term, he invested the difference, he did everything that conventional wisdom told him to do. The year he retired, he canceled his term policy in January. He didn't want to pay a premium anymore. But unfortunately, he canceled that policy in January and he passed away unexpectedly from cancer 10 months later. And he did do just that. He invested the difference in his 401k. And that is what most people do. Now, my sister-in-law is forced to live off of those investments. And the problem is that she will most likely outlive those investments. Or even if she doesn't, she's going to have to be very careful because there is volatility in the market. And I know it's not going to be a fun event for her if she sees a downturn, right? Because now she's going to have to be very, very careful, be afraid to spend money, live mostly on Social Security, hoping that it's going to make it through. Because if there's a global event, some kind of financial crisis, an act of God even, a political crisis, her entire nest egg is at risk, just like it is for a lot of retirees today. So if she should pull out too much money in the market at a time when it decides to take a tumble, she could easily run out of it. And she was only 62 when her husband passed away. So getting all the way through her 80s and even into her 90s could be challenging. You see, in the past, we had something called defined benefit plans, and these were pensions designed to be guaranteed income for life. Pension managers had the advantage of a 100-year timeline to be able to invest in very long-term, very solid, stable investments. And they also had the ability to pool large amounts of money so that in any given year, the amount of money that is being paid out to people actually taking their pensions is dwarfed by the size of the remaining pool of capital that they're working with. So they never really have to put the entire pool at risk. And much of a pension manager's plan, people might take note of this, was actually placed with the life insurance industry in annuities and life insurance because they knew, the pension managers knew, that life insurance industry is in the business of guarantees. They knew that they needed to provide guaranteed income. Now, suddenly, we are faced with a situation where the average American is being told to become your own pension manager. Isn't that nice? The problem is they don't have near the education that the pension manager who specialized in that had, and they have far less money to work with, putting the whole pool, their whole pool of capital, because it's only their pool, at risk, and with a far shorter timeline, again, without the education. Plus, they've been conditioned to believe that the only place to put those dollars is in the market in order to grow them. They're seeking that high rate of return because they've got a little less money, shorter timeline. All of those things just contribute to this problem that we are now facing as Americans to have any kind of retirement for ourselves. There is another factor here to consider, and that is when I speak of volatility, it takes more dollars to overcome a loss than you actually lost. And we also get misled by some things such as the average rate of return. So we get to looking at the average rate of return and we think that's great. But let me just give you a quick little math example. If I have $100 and I invest that and it makes 100% rate of return, I now have $200. But now if I lose 50%, so I have a 50% loss, I am back to $100. So did I actually gain anything? No, I'm exactly where I started at. I gained $0. I had a 0% rate of return, an actual rate of return. But with the 100% gain and a 50% loss, that is actually a 25% average rate of return. But my dollars didn't see anything positive. So sometimes even the language that is used can be very misleading and we don't actually do the math. So be honest with yourself. Whatever percentage rates you've been hearing about in the market, is that what you're actually seeing on the math on your statement? You might want to do a little checking that out because sometimes I think those numbers just don't jive. Okay. And then finally, there is taxes. Many people simply don't consider the taxes. They're busy bragging about the millions that they're projecting to accumulate. And Uncle Sam is going to be sure to get his first cut right off the top before you even see those dollars. We don't think about that. So we've become convinced that deferring taxes is the way to go. But I would ask you, do you really want to pay taxes on the seed or the harvest? Which one is bigger? We want to pay it on the seed, right? But we don't. We defer it down the road and we're going to pay it at the harvest. Now, don't you think maybe that was designed intentionally? Because that creates a bigger savings account for Uncle Sam. Oh, then some people think, well, taxes are going to be less in the future. Actually, there's only one way that your taxes are going to be less in the future, if you ask me, and that is if you're going to be poor. Because given the way the government loves to spend money like a drunken sailor, and given the fact that our national debt is climbing every single year, someone's going to have to pay for that. And I guarantee you it's not going to be Wall Street. It's not going to be the bankers. And if it is the government has no money without us. Okay. So we're going to be paying those taxes, those consequences. So as far as I'm concerned, unless you're planning to be poor, deferring taxes is not a good idea because also you're looking at kids are out of the house. You don't have them as a deduction. You don't have a mortgage as a deduction sometimes, most of the time, hopefully. Anyways, so these just things to think about. But that's the advice, right? Buy term and invest the difference. And of course, when they talk about investing the difference, most people aren't going out. I mean, maybe some are, but most people aren't going out and putting that difference in more solid investments like maybe real estate or something. But even there's a market risk. Essentially, though, term insurance fundamentally, at the end of the day, is leaving your family at risk. When I say 99% of the time it doesn't pay out a death benefit, those are some pretty bad odds and they're not in your favor. If you decide you do want to get more insurance, then if you're getting it when you're older, maybe your health is failing, you might find that very challenging. Either it's going to be very expensive or you might even be uninsurable. Then when it comes to their life savings that we are now investing, I would argue that we're really, most of the time, the average Joe is not actually investing. You're actually playing Russian roulette with your life savings. It always amazes me that the same people who think that big corporations and greedy capitalists, or that's the name they give them, right? That these people or these entities are so awful. But when it comes to their 401k and investing, they're willing to put their money into the funds that are held by these people in the likes of Wall Street, despite the Bernie Madoffs of the world being exposed, despite all the movies. I mean, have we watched the movies lately? We still leave room for Wall Street to somehow be virtuous when it comes to our retirement money. Okay, sure. Have it your way. Who am I to say? I'm just someone doing a little known podcast, asking questions and wondering. I get it. But I am here to maybe be a small voice to help people rethink their thinking and ask some good questions. So here's a question I'd also want to ask. when you are buying term and you're investing the difference, what are you actually investing in? Now, there is a really good book that I love. In fact, it's right up here next to Becoming Your Own Banker, and it is truly at the top of my list of favorites. And this book is a classic on finance. It was written in 1926 by George Clason, the richest man in Babylon, before a lot of the nonsense in our financial world was around. Okay. And it teaches the 7 cures for a lean purse. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck, this is a good book to read. And then the 5 laws of gold. And the 5 laws of gold is more like, now that you're not living paycheck to paycheck, what do I do to grow my money? So let's just look at these 5 laws of gold for a second, because these were really informative to me. And I find them to be just so, I love that they're called laws of gold. It's a little bit like gravity. You can't avoid it. If you follow these laws of gold, you will grow wealth. Pretty simple, right? Harder to put into practice, perhaps. The laws, they have actually act as very good guideposts for me. Okay, the first law of gold. Gold comes gladly and increasing quantity to any man who will put by not less than 1/10 of his earnings to create an estate for his future and that of his family. So, capitalizing, regular old-fashioned savings. All right, I like it. The second law of gold. Gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds it for profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field. So, diligently and wisely putting those dollars to work. The third one, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invests it under the advice of men wise in its handling. Cautious owner. And then the fourth law of gold, which is the one I'm really wanting to get at here. Gold slippeth away from the man who invests in businesses or purposes with which he is not familiar or which are not approved by those skilled in its keep. We're not about losing money. We're about keeping it. But gold slips away from the man who invested in businesses or purposes in which he is not familiar. In other words, he doesn't know what he's doing. In fact, it was this fourth law of gold that convinced me to get out of the market myself, because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And every time I would react emotionally, and sure enough, I'd lose money every time. So I was like, nope, none of that for me any further. And I was tired of the anxiety. Okay, that's just what I chose to do. I'll just give you the fifth one because we're here. Gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings. Oh, that might be a little bit of stock market advice there too. Impossible earnings. Or who followeth the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers who trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires in investments. Yeah, I think we all have a little bit of that naturally. But that one law of gold, that fourth law of gold in particular, I want to ask you this question. Do you know where your money is going when you are investing the difference? If you do, great. Godspeed to you. But what most people don't realize is that when you put your money in a mutual fund, you aren't even buying stocks in a company. Did you know that? You're actually buying shares of the mutual fund. And on top of that, even if you invest in stocks, only the initial IPO is the true investment. Every time a share is bought or sold after that IPO, it is simply based on someone's idea of whether or not it's going to go up or go down. It is pure speculation. That is not investing. And frankly, speculation is not wise management. And maybe I'll give a little bit of leniency to those who know and understand the market really well, but the average Joe simply does not. And is just that. It's just speculation, pure and simple. Now, again, I want to reiterate that the infinite banking concept and whole life insurance is not an investment of any kind and should not be compared to one. The point of the infinite banking concept and whole life insurance is to take over the banking function in your own life. So I do want to keep that front and center because I don't want you to get confused and think that I am comparing it to this investment. I'm not doing that at all. But what I am trying to compare here is the philosophies, the ideas, and the risk associated between these ideas of buy, term, and invest the difference, as opposed to the idea of using whole life insurance or the infinite banking concept. So I will say this, when I warehouse my dollars in the whole life insurance contract, I am working with guarantees. I am privately contracting with a life insurance company that is bearing the risk on my behalf. And in return for their bearing that risk, I'm receiving guarantees by contract. So my dollars pay a premium, which purchases a death benefit. This grows a cash value inside the policy, which is the equity of that policy. And by contract, it must equal the death benefit by age 121. This creates an ever-increasing exponential curve in the policy where the cash values rise every single day without risk and without exception. Every single day, forever. That is powerful. That is not a scam. And by the way, it just happens to also protect my family permanently. And when the company is profitable, they also pay a dividend. And while dividends are not guaranteed, once they are declared, they are guaranteed then. They can never go backwards or be taken away. This is unlike the market. You can have a gain, but you can lose those gains just as easily as you received them. They are always at risk until you sell. And the dollars that I warehouse in a life insurance policy and can be accessed tax-free and can go to my heirs tax-free upon my death without probate. So therefore, when I'm accumulating cash value in my policy and I access those dollars the way that we teach it for the infinite banking concept, there are no taxes involved whatsoever. So let's consider for a moment, shifting back now to this buy term and invest the difference model. One of the things that comes along with that model is the 4% rule. You may have heard of this. So when you invest your money in mutual funds, according to this rule, let's say you have accumulated $1 million in stock value. You can safely sell $40,000, so be able to receive that as income in your retirement year. And they used to say, well, then you could adjust that for inflation going forward after that. Well, inflation, we used to think of it as 3%. I think it's been a long time since we've only seen 3%. I don't know. But without the inflation, let's just forget that for a second. So you'll have a $40,000 per year income off of $1 million worth of your accumulation. Now, that's what we think, but actually the government, let's not forget, gets their cut. So that is actually looking a little bit more like $28,000 per year for that $1 million in your nest egg. How does that sound? So if we use the numbers that my friend wrote to me and said he's projecting 2.5 million at age 65, he's looking at about, if you use the 4% rule so that you can actually make that last, he's looking at about $70,000. Now, I don't know about you, but $70,000 isn't going very far now. And he's talking about 30 years down the road. So to me, these numbers don't jive very well. I don't know, just something to think about. But these are also projections. And are these projections based on Dave Ramsey's 12% year after year without fail? That is just fantasy land. And frankly, it's irresponsible. It is cruel and unkind to be teaching that sort of nonsense and people expecting that out of the stock market. No accounting for the volatility, no accounting for the losses that happen in the in-between. And God forbid you retire just before or just after a major loss. Like it's okay if you don't retire in 1987 or 2000 or 2008 or 9, but we have to time the market, right? We don't have a crystal ball. We have no idea when that's coming next. All right. I think that's a problem. We simply don't know. When Wall Street took over the pension money of the American people, starting in about 1980, remember this is kind of the new kid on the block, the 401k. Now, all of a sudden, we're just taking deductions out of the average American's paychecks and it's going straight to Wall Street. There was a huge influx of new money coming into Wall Street. That accounts for a lot of that greatest run up in the market, besides the new technologies and things that were growing between 1980 and the year 2000. Then, of course, we had the 2000 dot-com bubble burst. Got a little bit of dose of reality, right? And then we have another dose of reality in 2008 with the financial crisis in the real estate market. We are in now. So I think in so many ways, what happened between 1980 and 2000 seems to be stuck in our mind like that is the way it's always going to be forever. But the reality is that we are riding boom and bust cycles continuously. And as for me, at least, I don't want my life savings sitting on that boom and bust cycle, just waiting for the next roller coaster hill to go over. I think roller coasters are for theme parks, not for my life savings. At any rate, I want my life savings to have guarantees. When we had the original pension plans, that was the goal. And that is what life insurance companies are all about. They are in the business of guarantees. And they have been for over 100, even 200 years. Okay. Finally, let me just answer the last part of his message. He said, whole life costs 20 times more and never stops costing the policyholder. It's a crummy life insurance policy and a crummy investment too. Well, again, let me remind you, it is not an investment and it shouldn't be compared to one. So that's a problem right there. I would say it is more like a savings account on steroids. And I don't know where he gets the crummy insurance from, because it's actually insurance that's going to actually cover my family no matter my age when I pass away. So, okay. But that said, I really do wonder if this individual has ever actually seen a whole life insurance policy. And I would say especially one written for the infinite banking concept. Now, I'll grant you most people haven't, so we'll give a little bit of leeway for that. But my question is, do these people who are parroting this idea of whole life insurance as a scam, have they actually looked at one? Have they actually seen one in practice? Well, the policies that I write are specially designed for the infinite banking concept, and therefore they have early cash value, which makes them perfect for taking over the banking function in your life, which is what we use them for. And the life insurance companies that I write with guarantee that your dollars will grow inside of the whole life policy. Those cash values must equal the death benefit by age 121, like I mentioned, so you have an ever increasing pool of capital. And the life insurance companies that I work with have been consistently paying a dividend for more than 100 years. So, given these facts, then when I write a policy for a 35-year-old male, that man can expect, and now I'm just going to use this number for nice round numbers, a $10,000 premium. You get to choose the premium. You get to decide how much premium you want to pay. It's a misnomer that it's just so expensive. Pay what you want to pay in premium. I have a whole episode on how much premium you should pay if you really want to capitalize a system and take over the banking function in your life. But a $10,000 premium on a healthy 35-year-old male will actually be cash flowing, designed for the infinite banking concept, by year 4. So there is a loss of liquidity in the beginning because you're buying life insurance. You're actually paying for a death benefit that's going to cover you for your whole life. And remember, that's a very risky thing for the life insurance company, because it's not a matter of if you're going to die, it's a matter of when. Because with whole life, they're covering you no matter what. Okay? But nevertheless, by age 65, if he has paid $10,000 a year for 30 years, he's going to have put $300,000 worth of premium into that policy. But he's going to have access to $589,000 in cash value and increasing every single year thereafter. So it's not an investment, but is that a pretty good savings account? You can actually access almost twice in 30 years what you put in the beginning, and you can access it the whole time, by the way. As soon as there's cash value available, you can be using it, borrowing it, paying it back, financing everything you need in life, taking it and making investments in real estate and anything else that you want to. And here's the thing, by the time he's 70, he's only going to be allowed to pay $3,711 in premium. And when he does, he will actually experience an increase of $36,937 in cash value that year alone. That is almost 10xing his money. He will wish he could pay more premium because it's all relative. If he's 10xing his money, if that was $37,000 he was paying in premium, he would be turning it into $370,000 that year. Okay. Now, to be fair, this is assuming a dividend is paid, and dividends are not guaranteed. But as I said, companies I work with have paid them very consistently and consecutively every single year without fail for more than 125 years. But even if we look at the guaranteed side of the equation and the company never, ever paid a dividend, which is really just not reality, he would still have access to every single dollar he ever paid in and more. Plus, he would be still leaving a significant death benefit for his loved ones. So this idea that it never stops costing the policy owner is simply uninformed. Do you consider it a cost when you pay $3,700, but you receive almost $37,000 in cash value, in access to capital that you wouldn't have had before? Do you consider that a cost? If that's a cost that you're not willing to pay, I'll happily buy that policy from you and pay that cost myself. Thank you very much. But still, to my point, it's not an investment, but it is a great place to warehouse your money so that you can then go and make wise investments elsewhere. All right. But when you put your money in the stock market or even real estate, your dollar's doing one job. It's all it can do. You have to take it out of there and remove that investment in order to get it to go do something else. That too is something you can do with whole life insurance. I mean, the benefits go on and on and on, and yet it's a scam. Buy term and invest the difference. It's so powerful. So I'm not sure what about guarantees and access to capital while leaving your family fully protected just doesn't jive, but guarantees jive really well in my book. And I think I'll keep it that way. Okay. I hope you found this informative and I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we're done with the system and we're doing money differently. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs it, and visit us at banklessbydesign.com to learn how you can start living bankless by design.